Welcome to a video of some more of my reads from January. I would love to hear any of your thoughts on these books, so please let me know in the comments below what you have thought of these ones. If my voice sounds a little funny, I am still recovering. I've been a little sick this week, and so please bear with me, and I am excited to talk to you about these books. Okay, I read House of Salt and Sorrows by Erin A. Craig, and this is kind of a retelling of the 12 Dancing Princesses, I think, but I don't think I've ever actually read the 12 Dancing Princesses, at least not that I remember very well, so I guess I don't have a good firm basis for this book going in, but it follows our protagonist, Annalay, and she is one of 12 sisters, and her sisters keep dying, and it started to be talked around the town that her family is cursed, and she is convinced that her latest sister to die was murdered, and it goes on from there. So kind of a cool concept. It had a lot of different cool elements, just a cool setting, some mythological elements, just there were a lot of things that this book really had going for it, but I just feel like the execution really fell flat. It felt like 5 different books, but not in a good way, because the tone kept shifting. For 1 minute I'd think, oh wow, this is so fun, it's like a murder mystery, and then the next time like, oh no, this is like a teen young adult love triangle, and then the next minute I'm like, oh no, it's a fantasy book. But I never feel like it really, picked a lane. It tried to be everything, but it wasn't really successful, because it was just kind of every few minutes I'm like, what book am I reading again? How did this get to this? And so that was a little strange for me. I did get through it quick, so I mean, I don't think it's like not an engaging book. I just feel like it was kind of all over the place. The one thing that just did not work for me was kind of the characterization. I felt like a lot of the sisters didn't really have much personality, and the men were so one-dimensional. It was all about, oh, because they're super interested in her, and it almost seemed like weird forced love triangle. As one reviewer on Goodreads, I was scrolling through the reviews after I read it, and one thing that just stuck in my head was somebody said, being heterosexual is not a personality trait. And I think that kind of like sums it up for me. Just like, I had no real connection to these characters. And so, I mean, I think this was a really nice concept, but like execution-wise, it just felt kind of flat for me. And maybe I'm just a cynic and I don't love romancy stories, but I was like, oh, okay, she likes him, cool. So for kind of a heavy read, but I think a very good one, I read White Tears, Brown Scars, How White Feminism Betrays Women of Color by Ruby Hamad, and this was really good. If you've read the book White Fragility, it's very similar to that, and if you've read a lot of books in the same space, you probably have read a lot of these ideas before, but it was very good. A historical look at women's roles throughout history, and how a lot of times white women have been actively participating in campaigns of oppression. And I really feel like what I got out of this, I mean, like, there were lots of good things to get out of this, but it was a very introspective moment for me personally, because I feel like it's something that I've realized even in just like my personal relationships, like with my husband or family members and things, is that, my emotions do have power, and it's something that's very unfair a lot of times. It's just, and it's not always a conscious choice on my part, but it's like a subconscious thing that I think it's so easy to become defensive when you are called out on things that are wrong, and you can use like being seen as a good person who is just trying her best. I can use my tears and my emotions to make it about me, and that's like never acceptable. So I thought it was a very introspective moment, because I do tend to be kind of a crier, like that's something that I do, but here's a silly example. If my husband comes up to me and says, hey, will you please, you know, try to make sure that my shirt doesn't get put in with the colors and gets stained, you know, and my response is, how could you do this to me? I'm just trying my best here. Then it's all about me and not about him trying to, you know, talk to me about things. And when you're confronted with difficult things, it's so easy to become defensive. And I thought this was a good reminder to be humble and to really listen to other people's points of view and people's perspectives, because it is so easy to make it about yourself. And I appreciate this book for its research, as well as just the reminder to, you know, make sure that when you are showing emotion, that you're not using it as a weapon, and that you are being open to understanding other people. And so I thought, like, personally for me, that's what I got out of it. But as well, it had, you know, really important historical commentary and current commentary on how women of color are not being heard and listened to because of white women's continued benefits that they receive from white supremacy. So, like, this was a very good book all in all. Okay, I read Evicted, Poverty and Profit in the American City by Matthew Desmond. And this book is nonfiction. He lived in a neighborhood in Milwaukee and learned and researched all about the eviction process and the cost it has on human life, and just what it does to people's lives. And this book follows some firsthand accounts of frequent evictions and what happens with that. And it's honestly, as I was listening to this one, I kept thinking, oh, this is a complicated and difficult, horrible problem. How can we ever fix this? Like, that was what was going through my head. So I really appreciated that near the end, the author really had some good, concrete ways that we could improve what is going on with evictions, and, you know, just different policies that we should support. Things like housing vouchers and how to implement them so it is implemented fairly, proper ways that we could put checks on landlords to make sure that people aren't profiting and benefiting off of poverty, and that things are more equitable and fair. So I really appreciated the end of this book. I feel like the book really put a human face to evictions and poverty, and was really well done. But that last little bit was really helpful for me to not feel kind of hopeless. I also really liked his conclusions that, you know, housing would fix a lot of other societal ills, because people don't put down roots and try to make a community better if they are constantly insecure about where they're going to live. And so it all comes back to, you know, that hierarchy of needs, right? So you need to have home and security before you can start focusing outside of yourself and helping others. And one of his examples, one of the people that he followed, was someone who was struggling with a drug addiction, and he wasn't able to overcome that until he had stable housing, because these problems, they're not things that can be overcome if you're constantly in fear of losing your place of living. And so if we can work on those issues, we can solve a lot of, you know, like poverty, homelessness, drug addiction, violence, all those things. One of the policies that just shocked me while reading this book was that in the city he was researching in, they had some laws put in place where women could be evicted from their apartments if there were problems with police coming to their apartment. So basically, what happened is that women who were victims of domestic abuse would call in to get police help, and then they would be evicted. And so, you know, government leaders were saying, if these women would just report domestic abuse, we could help them. But instead, these women just choose to stay in these abusive situations. And a lot of times, that's not really the case. It was that these women had to make a calculation. Do I call the police, or do I call the police and get evicted, or do I put up with this abusive situation? And it's just things like that I'm like, there are some small common sense things that could be done to improve this situation, as well as some major changes that need to happen. So this was it was a really interesting look into something that I had not known very much about to begin with. And if anyone knows anything else, any other books about eviction and housing in the US, I would love to read a little more about that. It was very interesting. For a really sweet book, I read Under the Whispering Door by T.J. Klune. Now, he also wrote a book that I loved from last year, which was The House in the Cerulean Sea. And I think I just like his writing style. It's very quirky and fun. So this has been described as kind of a mix of like a Frederick Bachman book, The Man Called Uwe or Anxious People. It's a mix between that in tone and the TV show The Good Place, which already sells it for me. I'm like, yes, I want to be there. But this was just really sweet and kind of meaningful. So this is following our main character, Wallace Price, and he's just kind of a jerk, and he is not a kind person, and then he dies. And in this book, the system of the afterlife is a reaper comes and takes the person to a ferry station, and a ferryman helps them work through the grief of dying and work through what happened in their life so that they feel ready to move on to what's next. And I really liked this view of the afterlife. I liked the view of that, death isn't the end and we can all improve and work on things. And it was just a very human look, that people make bad decisions a lot of times because they are scared and they feel alone and they need that, support, and we shouldn't just abandon people and we should work towards it. So I really liked kind of the human aspect. I thought it was really sweet, and it really talked about the stages of life and just such a positive look on humanity. So anyways, I enjoyed this. It did focus a lot on a romance, which was pretty sweet as well. TJ Klune tries to write, at least in his bio, he said he's focused on writing queer romances, and I feel like this one was very successful in just being very sweet and just very wholesome, very central to the plot, but also not annoying. Sometimes I'm a bit of a cynic with these romance books, but this it had a good, the story had good bones and the romance filled it out. It wasn't every random thing shoved in to try to support this romance. It just felt very organic. So it was very sweet. Overall, I really did enjoy this book, and I am excited to see anything else that TJ Klune might come out with. And that last one is about how sappy I'm going to get because I must be a cynic because everybody likes this book, but I did not enjoy the book The Love Hypothesis by Ali Hazelwood. And maybe I'm just a cynic, maybe I'm not buying into this. This had all of the depth of a really corny Hallmark movie. I just could not handle it. So basically, the idea behind this is Olive Smith is worried that her friend won't date Olive's ex-boyfriend and wants her friend to know that she's moved on so that her friend is free to go date her ex-boyfriend. And so Olive kisses the first guy she sees and then they decide that they should fake date, and she is a PhD student and but he's a professor, and then they have this whole love story and fake dating, all the weird tropes. What is it with these kinds of romance books why does everything in a romance book have to be based on poor communication. Like, everything could be fixed if people would just stop and talk to each other, and I find that so frustrating and so annoying. Also, what is this where, like, we as a society have decided that men that are unable to express their emotions and are grumpy and kind of come off as a jerk are actually wonderful, loving, amazing people deep down, and they just need a sweet, wonderful woman to fix them. Like, I hate that trope. If there is some man who comes across as rude and can't express his emotions, that doesn't sound like the ideal man to me. Like, it just, I'm like, ew, why are you with him? Like, so it just wasn't really for me. I just got mad at the whole thing. I'm like, talk to each other. If she, in the initial part of this book, had just gone to her friend and said, hey, I was never really interested in that guy in the first place. I really hope you'll believe me. I'd like you to date him. And had been really upfront with her friend, the entire plot wouldn't have happened, and that would have been lovely. The one thing I feel like this book has going for it, which is why I didn't rate it 1 star, is that it did have some interesting thoughts on women in academia and some of the problems that they might encounter, and so that was fine. Like, I enjoy the commentary there, but the romance was just and it's fine. It just wasn't for me. I must be a cynic because I just don't get it. I prefer a really solid story and then a lovely romance in there versus nothing real, a romance that they're really pushing with a bunch of contrived elements, you know, to kind of shove it together. It just felt contrived. So I didn't get this one. And those are some of the books that I have read this month. I will probably be back with an end of January or beginning of February wrap up. Please let me know where you have disagreed with me on these books. I think some of my opinions were a little bit controversial on this, so I would love to hear any dissenting opinions. And I will see you all on the next one.